100 years later, what happens after James Joyce's Ulysses is published? It occurs to me that a few of you did not finish reading Ulysses last night. With this in mind, allow me to set the scene. Happy birthday, typos. 4 weeks from today will mark the 100th anniversary of February 2nd, 1922, the date on which Sylvia Beach, an American expatriate, the operator of the Parisian English language bookstore Shakespeare and Company, became the first publisher of Ulysses and hands the first 2 copies to Joyce as he celebrates his 40th birthday. Beach arranges for the book to be printed in English in the city of Dijon, appropriately the mustard capital of France. The compositors are Frenchmen who know little or no English and drink wine at lunch while compositing. Joyce insists the publishing date must be his birthday, February 2nd. The date is uniquely Candlemas Day, which marks the close of the Christmas season, and Groundhog Day. The pairing offers Joyce a setup of a lifetime comic possibilities. The first edition carries a note illustrating Joyce's exceedingly casual editing style and, perhaps, a commentary on compositors who drink wine at lunch. It says, the publisher asks the reader's indulgence for typographical errors unavoidable in the exceptional circumstances. On close inspection, there are 5,000 typographical errors, major and minor, in the first edition of Ulysses. Why did Joyce write Ulysses? He tells a colleague amid creating early drafts. Here's what he says. The most beautiful, the most human traits are contained in Homer's Odyssey. I was 12 when we took up the Trojan War at school. I find the subject the most human in literature. Ulysses didn't want to go off to Troy. He knew the reason for the war. It was only a pretext for Greek merchants seeking new markets. When the recruiting officers arrived, he's plowing his farm. He pretends to be mad. Thereupon, they place his 2-year-old son in the furrow in the ground. Observe the motifs. The only man against the war is being threatened. Then the motif of wandering. Ulysses is also a great musician. He has himself tied to a mast. The motif of the artist who will lay down his life rather than renounce his interests. Then the delicious humor. And then the return home. How profoundly human. And Joyce ends, I am almost afraid to treat such themes. It's overwhelming. Parallels with Homer. The first public clue. Joyce insists that the first edition's cover matches the color of the Greek flag. Among the connections between Joyce's Ulysses and Homer's Odysseus, the Odyssey, Joyce simply translates the Greek name Odysseus to the Latin Ulysses. A man named Mr. Leopold Bloom wanders Dublin in Joyce's book, which equates with Ulysses' travels in getting home per Homer. Ulysses' son, whose name is Telemachus, becomes Stephen Daedalus, lacking poise and confidence. Penelope, Ulysses' wife, becomes Molly Bloom with requisite suitors, and perhaps the magical drug moly adds to Molly's allurements. Top 3. Authors most cited in computer searches are 1, who wrote the Bibles? 2, William Shakespeare. 3, Homer. But if you enter a search limitation, Homer, but not Simpson, aha, Joyce's numbers exceed those of Homer. Joyce's epic. Ulysses, in 18 episodes, tells of a day in Dublin, a Thursday, June 16th, 1904, often cited as Bloomsday. Joyce's writing style is classified as literary modernism, which focuses on two words, inner and lower. Inner refers to stream of consciousness, as Joyce offers depictions of what a few characters are actually thinking. Lower. Lower refers to actions below the waist, generally digestive and also sexual. About writing, Joyce says, I want the reader to always understand through suggestion rather than direct statement. A Joycean scholar, Vicky Mahaffey, explains, Joyce was a radical when it came to words. He dug into their roots, resurrected their foreign origins, freed the humor and significance of the puns and metaphors. Ulysses, Miss Mahaffey says, is a kind of linguistic carnival, a riot of extravagant verbal excesses punctuated by unexpected, often poignant economies. Ulysses is far longer than you would like until you've read it once. Then suddenly it seems way too short. And the late composer-lyricist Stephen Sondheim offers, quote, the best art, or at least the kind that I like best, involves making the most out of the least, though not always, as for example, Ulysses, which makes a great deal out of a lot and which I love. The key personages in Joyce's book. 1, Stephen Dedalus, 22 years old, musing about becoming a writer, unhappy with his lodging, his friends, his family, his work. We see him in the novel irked, introspective, scholarly, warm, open, very, very drunk, and even insensitive. Secondly, Mr. Leopold Bloom, age 38, he who puts the bloom in Bloomsday, a newspaper space salesman or ad salesman. Bloom, it's a Jewish name, is not at ease in 1904's Catholic Dublin. Bloom, with a stimulating mind to which Joyce provides a great deal of access, has views on the practical mechanics of living. And lastly, Molly Bloom, age 33, wife to Mr. Bloom, a singer by training and, yes, a sensual soul. We meet her at a disquieting time as she shares a detail-oriented memory. There are others, but these three comprise the heart of our voyage. And a voyage is what Ulysses is about. Voyages of fact and fantasy are its storytelling's heart since the caveman's hearth. The very first trial, obscene. In 1918, 4 years before Miss Beach publishes Ulysses, Joyce agrees to publish segments of Ulysses in an American literary quarterly called The Little Review. The Little Review is well known for its pacifistic anti-World War I standing. The magazine is run by Margaret Anderson and Jane Heap, who, in 1918, are also lovers. At one point, a copy of Ulysses' 13th episode, in which a man masturbates with his hand in his pocket, is mysteriously received by the daughter of an attorney who just happens to be working with the New York Society for the Suppression of Vice. The society files obscenity charges against the Little Review. There also exist claims that views of pacifistic lesbians and the question of who sent the 13th episode draft to the young woman are at the actual genesis of the complaint. At a hearing in New York City, Margaret Anderson recalls one of three magistrates, two are seen sleeping, directs her to leave the court before a critical passage is read aloud. A lawyer tells the magistrate, "Excuse me, Your Honor, she is the publisher." In her memoir, Anderson writes, "The judge responded, well, I'm sure she didn't know the significance of what she was publishing." Based on questionable findings, the Little Review serialization is declared obscene. 500 copies of the periodical are burned by the US Post Office. The ruling frightens US publishers from committing to publish Ulysses. And then, 4 years later in 1922, Miss Beach steps in, publishes the first edition in English, in France, and in which there are 5,000 errors. Many key book reviews are glowing, and the banning and the ensuing uproar of publicity and the public gossip drive a mounting demand for copies of Ulysses. Contraband. In the next decade, tourists regularly bring home illegal copies of Ulysses. These copies, incomplete, bastardized, become available first at a trickle, then as a geyser. Joyce is perturbed, disturbed, and frustrated by reports of the sale of the illegal copies. He hears 13,000 copies are printed in Japan, sold out. 10,000 illegal copies are made from the Beach first edition, and more and more. It's reported that more than 30,000 sham copies are sold to tourists at prices in 1922 as high as $30, which is about $500 today. In New York City, the Gotham Book Mart smuggles in unbound pages from Europe and restitches finished copies. A Canadian smuggler is caught in Detroit with ungathered pages strapped all around his body. Frustrated by Ulysses' profiteers, Joyce seeks formal recognition and, most of all, spongolix. Spongolix, a monetary metaphor of possible Greek origin, often used in Ireland. Joyce wants those spongolix from America. Sylvia's sister. In mid-1931, 9 years after the first trial, Beach's sister discusses a second trial with Mr. Alexander Lindley, an attorney in the offices of Wolf, Greenbaum, and Ernst, and the possible publication of an American Ulysses edition. The Ernst of the firm is Morris Ernst, a renowned proponent of both privacy rights and freedom from censorship. Lindley sends a memo to Ernst predicting, quote, "This will be the grandest obscenity case in the history of law and literature," and so it is. The second trial. The second trial takes place at New York City's Bar Association building before Judge John Woolsey. A festival of previously unpublished private documents, strategic legal plans, contemporary newspaper reports give rise to enough fascinating trial plot lines to make Stephen King green with envy. After a period of filings and Ulysses reading assignments from June 1933 onwards, oral arguments for the trial begin on November 25th, 1933, and Woolsey delivers his opinion on December 6th, 1933. The remarkable defense attorney, Morris Ernst. I add his full name for committed Joyceans, Morris Leopold Ernst. He studies the possible impact of several potential judges. He analyzes the etymology of wordings. He parses historical changes in obscenity definitions, as well as the public's current view of what is considered obscene. He reminds the judge that in 1644, Your Honor, at that time, maypole dancing was banned due to the phallic significance of maypoles. He reports, Your Honor, in 1847, the publication of Jane Eyre is decried as, quote, too immoral as to be rated decent literature. And then he points out, Your Honor, in 1863, Manet's nude Olympia painting is deemed pornographic. Mr. Ernst then adds, in 1900, women in bathing costumes, without sleeves, without long skirts, were put into jail. By 1911, knees could be shown, but legs had to be covered. And now, sunsuits, remember this is 1933, sunsuits leave, Your Honor, very little of the human form concealed. Ernst's focus, quote, the test of obscenity is a living standard. Ulysses must be judged by the mores of the day. Ernst recites the progress of synonyms for several words. Your Honor, no better series in our own generation can be found than in the travelogue of bathroom, toilet, water closet, WC, gentleman's room, John, can, and lately, excuse me, I'm going to make a telephone call. Woolsey's decision. The judge finds, quote, in spite of Ulysses' unusual frankness, I do not detect anywhere the leer of the sensualist. Ulysses is not pornographic. Woolsey cites Joyce's astonishing success in the use of stream of consciousness. The crux, quote, Ulysses is a sincere and serious attempt to devise a new literary method for the observation and description of mankind, and the book may therefore be admitted into the United States. Without this ruling, we would not have the stories of John Updike's loves, Vladimir Nabokov's loins, or for that matter, Philip Roth's livers, or many, many other titles. Ernst's fee. Ernst requests a flat fee. Bennett Cerf, Random House's co-founder, thinks the request is too high. And while seeking the glory of getting Ulysses back into print, Cerf offers Ernst 5% on the first 10,000 copies and 2% on subsequent reprintings. Then, reportedly, one of the two adds 2 itty-bitty words to the contract. The words are, quote, for life. Ernst happily accepts. In Ernst's 1976 obituary, the New York Times reports, quote, as a result, Ernst received several $100,000. Postscript. At the news of the verdict and the tsunami of global publicity, a near cry throughout the world, Ulysses is now kosher to read. Random House orders a print run of 10,300 copies to be ready in 50 days, a record, and the copies at 350 sell out. But, oops, I did it again. I believe that's the name of the song. Random House, in resetting its new edition, uses a faulty, error-ridden, pirated text, the one with the same 5,000 errors. These errors are not corrected for a number of years until the 1986 publication of the corrected text, sometimes called the Gabler Edition, soft cover. Over a 64-year period, readers, teachers, editors, book reviewers, you and I suffer with 5,000 errors. Following Woolsey's ruling, 2 new unlimited editions and many, many reprintings appear. The book has widespread availability. One exception, Ireland. For years, when customers ask to purchase Ulysses, the Irish bookseller hands them a copy placed in a paper bag. The practice is reported to have only ended in 2004 when the International James Joyce Symposium was held in Dublin. Ulysses is displayed in 2004 for the very first time in bookstore windows and on shelves, and is sold unbagged. Greatness. Joyce's greatness is derived from his work, his words, the libraries that hold his books, and the books about his books, and in the outcome of the second trial, and the ever-expanding audience from republications and translation. In short, his greatness is the first, is seen as its major impact on our culture. Joyce's books. In his lifetime, 1882 to 1941, he publishes just 6 books and 1 play, 4 books in prose, 2 in poetry. The prose works, 15 short stories in Dubliners, the book containing the short story The Dead, arguably the greatest short story ever written. Then a Bildungsroman, the story of how somebody becomes a young adult, entitled A Portrait of the Artist as a Young Man. Then Ulysses, a book about a day, and finally Finnegan's Wake, a book about night. The 2 poetry volumes are Chamber Music. The title said to describe the sound of a professional lady relieving herself in a ceramic urn behind a curtain, literary modernism, and Pomes Peniche. The first word, Pomes, P-O-M-E-S, puns on both the French word for apple, pomme, and the English word poem. The 2 words are the cry of a street barker, Pomes Peniche, selling poems cheaply. The play, rarely performed, is Ulysses. Joyce spends 7 years writing Ulysses. During which he moves into and out of 19 addresses in 3 cities in 3 countries. Joyce works for 20,000 hours creating Ulysses, adding fully a third to the text in his editing process, a process made difficult by lifelong eye issues. His eyes. During the writing of Ulysses, Joyce suffers a glaucoma attack and 2 iritis attacks, the first surgical iridectomy on his right eye, and experiences dramatic vision reduction and ever-mounting eye pain. Writing in a darkened room, he reports, quote, I write and correct with one or two eyes, 12 hours a day, stopping of intervals of 5 minutes when I cannot see anymore. In his lifetime, Joyce undergoes 13 eye operations. Joyce's early days, a very terse summary. Schooled by Jesuits, he wins early academic praise and a National Writing Award at age 10. He teaches himself Norwegian so he can write to playwright Henrik Ibsen, and Ibsen writes back. At college, he's highly regarded for both his limericks, which he signs James Joyce, and his expertise in playing charades. As Ulysses gains global fame, repositories of Joyce's materials begin to form. The State University of New York at Buffalo, now the largest global collection of Joycean materials, holds more than 10,000 pages of Joyce's writings and related materials. Joycean matters occupy some 260 linear feet at Buffalo, where there are 2,700 records for items by and about Joyce. Other major collections are at the University of Tulsa, the Rosenbach in Philadelphia, the University of Texas, Ireland's National Library in Dublin, and the Zurich James Joyce Foundation, a mecca for scholars and students. Joyce's editing. How did he arrive at the 265,981 words on the 640 pages of Ulysses? After making notes, often using free library book call sheets, remember when libraries had library call sheets? As he rarely could afford to buy paper, he composes drafts. The drafts, often re-edited by Joyce, go to typists. After proving the transcriptions, he makes immense changes in longhand with a steel pen, relying on his memory and rarely consulting the previous drafts that he has sent onwards. The re-edited transcriptions go to one of 26 French compositors, the wine drinkers, who admits setting alien English words into type, let alone New Joycean words, try to decode Joyce's scrawl while creating other errors. Joyce recalls at one point that his notes not used in writing Ulysses weigh some 24 pounds. Testing the printer's patience as the birthday publishing date of the first edition looms, Joyce asks the printer to please, quote, leave space for words he was thinking about. All this as his eyesight fails. Joyce's brilliance, subdued to decisive. Joycean scholar Mike Groden notes that Joyce ends Ulysses with Molly's famed remembrance, and yes, I said yes, I would, yes. Later, Joyce then crosses out would and inserts will before the ultimate yes. Groden says, quote, the original ending is grammatically smoother than the revision as it continues Molly's thoughts in a constant verb tense, but it is less dramatic. The switch to will turns the last words into a memory of spoken dialogue as it changes the endings from the subdued subjunctive would to the decisive indicative will. Literary criticism. Librarians at major collection and book dealers agree that today some 10,000 bound volumes, 10 2,000 bound volumes analyze aspects of Joyce's creativity. 1,800 of these deal only with Ulysses. Additionally, there are 16,000 articles on Joyce published in scholarly journals, magazines, and newspapers. And there are more than 15,000 dissertations citing Joyce dating back to 1928. In July 1998, a panel of editors and writers names Ulysses as the best English language novel of the 20th century. Joyce's words. The Oxford English Dictionary currently uses citations from Joyce to define 2,474 words. The OED also lists 414 words created by Joyce. Joyce's letters. There are numerous volumes, 8 or 9, of Joyce's letters in print, covering maybe 1,500 letters. A soon-to-be released work, The Unpublished Letters of James Joyce, will contain new letters chosen from some 4,000 extant letters, postcards, and telegrams. Translations. Ulysses is now available in 41 translations, including all the Romance languages, Arabic, plus Arabic, Armenian, Basque, Braille, Gaelic, Hebrew, Mongolian, Turkish, Ukrainian, among others. In 16 of the 41 languages, there are now multiple translations, 4 each in Spanish and Italian, 3 in Dutch, and 2 in Chinese. Among the problems in translating Ulysses, reportedly one reference repeatedly poses issues while spurring translator innovations. In Ulysses, Stephen Dedalus recalls he's in debt to an Irish author named George William Russell, who writes under the alias A.E. Stephen remembers the debt, the monetary debt, as well as his 5 basic English vowels, and puns in his mind, A.E., I-O-U. Absent fluency, one may only imagine the issue in translating this into Mongolian. Now, after Ulysses has been corrected and republished and translated, did you know there's a mathematical formula known as the Joyce sequence? Did you know law courts, anal retentive law courts, permit use of the unmodified descriptor Joycean? Did you know there's a computer language called Joycean? Did you know if you simply entered James Joyce in a computer search site in 2004, you'd momentarily have 900,000 results. In 2008, you'd see 4.5 million. As of this morning, there are 205 million results. Did you know physicists use a measuring scale based on the word quark, a word created by Joyce? Did you know when an atomic lab experiment goes awry, it's called a bloom? Did you know there's an asteroid, a space robot, and a butterfly, all named James Joyce? Did you know there's a band named James Joyce? Did you know golfers often decry the lay of a stroke golf ball, saying, uh-oh, that's a James Joyce? And their partners ask, why is it a James Joyce? And the comeback is always, well, it's difficult to read. Did you know there's a James Joyce gin and a James Joyce cocktail? And on the web, there are millions of references with humongous duplications to James Joyce pubs and James Joyce bars. Did you know there are some 2,000 university classes wherein Ulysses is taught. It's generally required reading in English lit classes. Did you know that the words James Joyce set free via the trial are now associated with, well, everything? For instance, there's a real estate ad in South Carolina citing a, quote, James Joyce model home. What in heaven's name is a James Joyce model home? Does it have a spare room for trysts? J. Craig Venter, a biochemist and geneticist, creates the world's first synthetic chromosomes, and needing a trademark, turns to Joyce's notation that a writer's true goal is, quote, to recreate life out of life. Every one of Ventner's synthetic chromosomes, numbering now in the billions, is stamped with the words life out of life. And then there's the very first federal court filing dated March 2010, challenging the Affordable Care Act. The first line of the filing states, picture a law written by James Joyce. But above all, Joyce's major impact after Ulysses' rescues is found in the law, as we have seen in regard to the second trial's decision, and beyond the law, in literature, art, and music. In all four classifications, the law, literature, art, and music, Ulysses has had an impact on our lives. Literature. There are more than 50 authors with wildly diverse literary interests who attribute shifts in their writing styles due to their reading James Joyce. Faulkner, Nabokov, Beckett, Bellow, Stoppard, Rushdie, Updike, Thornton Wilder, David Foster Wallace, Philip K. Dick, science fiction writer, Joyce Carol Oates, Pynchon, Vonnegut, etc., etc., etc. Some edited quotes. Salman Rushdie. Joyce used stylistic means which were novel in his time. In short, he built a universe out of a grain of sand. That was a revelation. It was so perfect, inspiring. T.S. Eliot. I hold Ulysses to be the most important expression which the present age has found. It is a book to which we are all indebted and from which none of us can ever escape. Don DeLillo. It was through Joyce that I learned to see something in language that carried a radiance, something that made me feel the beauty and the fervor of the words, the sense that a word has life and a history. James Patterson. Ulysses is one of the novels that most influenced me as a young writer, simply because as I read it, I realized that Joyce was in a totally untouchable category. And it started me thinking about what type of stories I might be able to tell really well. George Orwell. I rather wish I never read Ulysses. It gives me an inferiority complex. When I read a book like that and then come back to my own work, I feel like a eunuch who has taken a course in voice production. Joyce Carol Oates. Ulysses is certainly the greatest novel in the English language, and one might argue for it being the greatest single work of art in our tradition. And lastly, Anne Enright, quote, Joyce made everything possible, opening all the doors and the windows. I have a theory that he was, in fact, a woman. He wrote endlessly introspective and domestic things, which is the accusation made about women writers. There's no action and nothing happens. Then you look at Ulysses and say, well, he was a girl. That was his secret. The world of art. One book Joyce in Art. One of the works gleaned for this talk, and a complete list of all the books is available. This book illustrates the work of more than 200 artists whose creations following the publication of Ulysses are familiar to the wide world. Artists motivated by Joyce and who contributed major works dealing with Joyce include the sculptor Brancusi, the patriarch of modern sculpture; Richard Hamilton, the father of pop art; Robert Motherwell, a key figure in the development of abstract impressionism; Joseph Kosuth, one of the pioneers of conceptual art. His focus explores the role of language and meaning in art, and many others, such as Augustus John, Susan Weil, Sean Scully, Joseph Beuys, Louis Le Brocquy, and not Henri Matisse. In 1935, Joyce and Matisse agreed to sign 1,500 copies of a new Ulysses edition, which will offer new Matisse illustrations. Matisse signs 1,500 copies. When the books are shipped to Joyce for his signature, he discovers the new illustrations are of the Odyssey, and Matisse has not in fact read Ulysses. In anger, Joyce signs only 250. Music. Following the publication of Ulysses, many musical creators, composers, and performers are taken with Joyce's prose and seek to use Joyce's words in new musical creations. You may recall that an entire segment of Ulysses, the Sirens episode, is based entirely on music. Musicians whose work is inspired by Joyce include Bob Dylan, John Lennon. John Lennon at one point tells a writer, "Finding Joyce is like finding daddy." George Antheil, Syd Barrett, Samuel Barber, Kate Bush, Van Morrison, Pierre Boulez, Lou Reed, David Del Tredici, Jerry Garcia, Leonard Cohen, Joey Ramone, Gene Erdman, the Clancy Brothers, U2, the Modern Jazz Quartet, John Cage, Jefferson Airplane, and Carly Simon. One may easily locate Joycean citations in the musical works of 500 Joycean influenced composers and performers. Among my favorites, some of you may recall from the 60s, the popular novelty record, Hello Mudder, Hello Fada, in which Alan Sherman sings to the tune of Punchinelli's Dance of the Hours, featured in Ulysses, about a child at a summer camp. The lyric continues, and the head coach wants no sissies, so he reads to us from something called Ulysses. There's also a recording by Black 47. The rock group's name refers to one of the Irish potato famines, and their recording includes the song, quote, I got laid on James Joyce's grave. It contains the matchless lyric, James Joyce, James Joyce. I was just trying to find my voice. Try to remember to look at all of the people pictured on the album cover of your old Beatles Sgt. Pepper album. That's Joyce in the upper right-hand corner, right next to Bob Dylan. So, at the close of all this, the answer to the question, what happens after Ulysses is published? One speaker's viewpoint, taking into consideration all of the aforementioned, Joyce's epic, the words, the commentaries, the libraries, the authors, the articles, the dissertations, the translations, the letters, the artists, the musicians, and much other stuff. We've no time at this session for the films, The Young Lions, The Manchurian Candidate, The Departed, the stage plays, Ulysses in Nighttown, The Dead, the musicals, the producers, and even the pre-COVID driven growing popularity in the New York metro market of James Joyce inspired tattoos. Thinking of all this, one will, the decisive indicative, one will declare that this book, this one book, this Ulysses has become a highly significant pillar of the Western world's culture. Beyond the Bible, beyond Shakespeare, of what are those authors' work could one make a similar claim? Thank you for your time. If you have a question, please use the, so to speak, raise your hand access button to ask the question. Julian will turn on your mic when appropriate. And to locate the raise hand button, use the reaction button on your computer or the more button on your iPhone or iPad. If you prefer to ask a question privately, please don't hesitate to reach me by either email or phone, but not tonight. Also, let me know if you'd like a copy of the book sheet. Questions?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Speak up.
Hi, my name is Kevin Gilroy. I very much enjoyed your presentation. It was encyclopedic, very charming at times, but I do have to take exception to your bringing out Gabler as the corrected edition. What Gabler did to Ulysses and Rose did to Phineas Wake is to say that there's no such thing as passive authorization, that Joyce could not have said something in a draft and not have it really show up in the final analysis. This is not true. Here's what Joyce said. Someone prepared an errata list from Ulysses, and Joyce vetoed many of the suggestion emendations, since he explained in a letter to Weaver in October 1922, these are not misprints, but beauties of my style hereto undreamt of. So
permit me to thank you very much for raising this issue. The gentleman is talking about the fact that the Gabler edition, on which some 30 noted educators, publishers, teachers got together to redo the original edition with the so-called, with the exact 5,000 errors in there, created a huge outbreak of commentary. If you will look back, if you're so inclined, to the New York Times or the literary publications in England, you will find over a period of 3 years, hundreds of letters arguing over this position. I will only tell you that in the overwhelming, if not 99.9% of educational facilities that teach Joyce to this day, the Gabler edition, the corrected edition, is accepted. However, an argument can be made, just as you have, sir, that there are issues in which is the correct wording, both for what Gabler did to Ulysses and other works. The point you are raising is exceedingly academic, quite accurate, and is left for the reader to decide. Thank you.
Hi, Jesse, Jim Doherty. Jesse, can you hear me?
I can, thank you,
Okay.
Jim.
Yes, not a question, but two additions to your list of Joycean influences. There's a company in Connecticut that large company that makes and sells tea called Simpson and Vale, and they actually have a James Joyce tea. And there is in Vermont several wine, cheese, gourmet shops where the owner is a big Joyce fan, and he has named the shop simply Daedalus.
And I can only tell you that within a hand's reach of this desk, I have a bottle of an extraordinary wine called Nora, which is named after Joyce's bride.
And I also have a bottle of that James Joyce Gin, and it's packaged in a box that is supposed to be the exact same blue as the cover of one of the editions.
Jim, I suggest, I'm sorry, I didn't get the name of the previous gentleman who raised the points about the Gabler edition. Perhaps under my sponsorship, we can all get together, and using your James Joyce Gin, we could discuss the merits of the Gabler edition and the other so-called corrected copies. Thank you.
Think we'll need.
Hello, Jesse. Can you hear me?
I can.
It says Danny Lehrman. That's my husband. This is his laptop. My name is Dana Lehrman, and I'm delighted. It's not really a question. I'm just delighted to see you. I studied Ulysses with you at Barnes & Noble many years ago, and then I went to NYU Continuing Ed, and we did, you led the class in Dubliners.
And in maybe 50 years, you will remember all of those sessions closed with the importance in everyone's life beyond being fully vaccinated against COVID. It's important that you read Ulysses, because don't ask me how, but I happen to know if you want to get to heaven,
Yes.
not on the short answer part of the test, but the essay question is exclusively on various things that occur during Ulysses. So thank you, Dana.
Well, let me just tell you, I do remember you telling the class that anyone who's read Ulysses will get into heaven.
I was sure of myself at the time.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Bill King, and wondering if you would care to make any kind of quick comparison between Finnegan's Wake and Ulysses, and if not in this context, perhaps some future presentation on Finnegan's Wake.
Phil, you're awake in?
I can't claim to be that. I think I went as far as the portrait of the artist and the Dubliners. In fact, I plan to listen to the Dubliners on a trip I'm taking tomorrow. Never have attempted Ulysses. My college roommate in freshman year took his first seminar when he joined the university on Finnegan's Wake, and I think they covered maybe the first 10 pages in the course of the entire course.
Well, to all of you out there, Dubliners, if you haven't read it, and it's easily available online, type in the words. The name of the short story is The Dead. And assuming you have a marital partner, or had a marital partner, or in search of a marital partner, or dated at least once someone else before you married whoever you married or are cohabitating with presently, it is an extraordinary short story. Finnegan's Wake. In the list that I have of all the books that I've consulted for this presentation, there are maybe 15 sources of understanding what Joyce has attempted to do. The amount of work that goes into understanding Ulysses is nearly a souffle, a piece of cake, a gumball, a Tootsie Roll in reading and understanding, compared to Finnegan's Wake. I am aware and have participated in a marvelous Finnegan's Wake reading group that has changed hands several times. But I can tell you at one point, and I hope I'm not wrong in it, it took us 5 years for a group to go through the Wake because there is so much to do. But I do understand, as someone has once written to me, that yes, Jesse, you're right. If you read Ulysses, you can get into heaven. But if you read the Wake, you also get an upper bunk. So that remains. Thank you.
Jesse, this is Erin Hartnett.
Hi.
Hi. Yeah, I just wanted to thank you so much. Your presentation was very informative and inspiring. And especially, I appreciated the listing of the ways that Joyce has inspired art and music and other cultural endeavors. So thank you so much, among many other. I also wanted to just follow up to let everybody know that the UB James Joyce collection did partner with a brewery in Buffalo a few years ago to produce a poet's porter in honor of James Joyce. The brewery's name is Flying Bison, and the brewer only produced enough for one brewing, but our goal is to do something else in the future. And we, of course, will let you know, and you can pass the word on to whomever is interested.
I think, Erin, that it would be a wonderful gesture. I'm happy to ask everybody's permission. If I could have their mailing address, if you could send each one a sample of the porter there. I don't know if it's permissible to mention it, but I'll just go ahead. I gather that the Morgan Library is going to have an extraordinary display of Joycean materials starting sometime in late January, February, dealing with the 100th anniversary. Well, we'll
Sorry,
see.
I just muted myself.
We'll see.
Yes. So I'm not sure that they have formally announced anything as of yet. So we are waiting for the Morgan to take the lead and make a formal announcement.
I see.
And,
well, my announcement had no permission of any kind from either the university, the State University in Buffalo, or the Morgan. It's just something that I thought of. Thank you very much.
No, it's fine. Yeah. And thanks for mentioning the UB James Joyce collection.
Next.
This is just Margaret piping up. I was just wondering if there were any more questions. I just wanted to, you know.
I think there are. I see there.
I do see some other hands raised. I just haven't heard anybody speaking. So I'm going to
please
disappear
if you have
again.
a question.
May I speak? This is
Please.
Allison Armstrong.
Hello.
Hi, Jesse. Just to go back to what was raised with your first speaker, the reason the Gabler so-called a corrected edition was and still is used so much in classrooms was that it was the only one for available for a long time. Random House got rid of the earlier one, the 1961 Random House edition that we all used in graduate school in the 70s and 80s, or early 80s. And then there was nothing else available except the Gabler so-called corrected text for quite a long time.
There's going to be a new edition coming out from Random shortly. And one of the best parts I should have mentioned in the Gabler edition is that there are notations of every 5 or 10 lines. It's numbered.
Yes, it's very
So you
convenient.
can take any book of commentary, like the wonderful Ulysses Annotated, and you can look up the exact episode number, the exact line number, and save a load of time by looking for the definition of a word that may have escaped your incredible education. Next.
Hello, Jesse. This is Molly Peacock, and I just wanted to thank you for this marvelous, marvelous lecture, and also to thank you for pointing out that the difference between would and will at the end of Ulysses. Wherever Mike Roden is, he's certainly smiling, having heard you quote him in that way. And just wanted to say that, and to thank you again for this incredible audience. So many people coming to hear this lecture and to celebrate the novel of the 20th century. Thanks.
Let me point out Molly Peacock is the bride of the late Mike Roden. And Mike has written a book which is on my list called The Necessary Fiction. And I would love just to talk to you about the book for an hour. This book contrasts chapter by chapter with Mike as an undergraduate discovering Joyce and writing about it, and then introducing his love affair with this young lady, Molly Peacock, and how their lives parallel the events of Ulysses. It's a marvelous book, and I make the statement as with full disclosure, I have no financial interests in it of any kind, but it's something that's very refreshing. And Mike's understanding of a chapter by chapter observation of Ulysses, as well as a parable verse by verse understanding of the Odyssey, is worth $1 million. But the best part of the book, Molly, is your love story.
Hi, Jesse. It's Kevin and Marie Finnegan. We studied with you down at the Irish Consulate about 12 years ago.
Hi.
Still
Oh,
talk about it. So it's just great to see you and to hear you again. This was a fascinating hour and continuing. So just wish you good health and thank you very much for all you do.
Oh, thank you, and thank Marie as well. Thank you.
Oh, Jesse, I just have to tell you, when I think of the class and the book, what affected me is the book broke my heart to this day. Just the story, so moving and really heartbreaking. So I thank you for it. It was real experience.
It is, and for those few of you who haven't read it, it gets better and better. Just the first time is magical. The second time is J.K. Rowling. The third time is any kind of magician beyond that. When you get up to the sixth or seventh time, you begin to see Joyce's inability to write prose. You take out one sentence, and all of a sudden you realize, my God, that's a perfect poem right there. And he doesn't announce it. And then you begin to understand the metaphors and the parodies of what Shakespeare did on what Dante did and what's in the Bible. For instance, at one point in a magical episode, I don't want to kill the plot, he talks about a man walking into a room and he says, this Ruth of a man. That's it, this Ruth of a man. Well, we know ruthless, and Joyce remembered before ruthless came Ruth. And what was Ruth? And also, it affords a biblical overlay, a more understanding of what the, and you can go on and on. But I remember that one particularly well. Thank you. Next.
Oh, hi there. I don't know if you were aware that John Quinn, who played his own part in the domestic unfolding and unfurling of Ulysses in America, in March of 2000, I had the privilege and the pleasure of producing at the City Bar as a member of its entertainment committee a 100th anniversary celebration of John Quinn's being called to membership at the City Bar. So if you haven't already, would you reflect for a moment, please, for those who may not know the singular role that John Quinn played in the birthing of Ulysses in America?
Yes, I will. But unfortunately, it may not agree with your vision or version of John Quinn. John Quinn was a lawyer, a very successful lawyer. He defended the two ladies from the Little Review in their trial. And Quinn had a very uncomfortable relationship with Mr. Joyce. Quinn cleverly, legally, properly, I guess, would often suggest to literary clients that he represented, in lieu of paying me, why don't you just send me your paperwork from which you created the book? And Mr. Quinn assembled a rather significant library of authors. I stand to be corrected, but I believe he sold a great deal of it to the library in Philadelphia. So he was very important in the defense of the two women, the two editors of the Little Review. His work as a lawyer has been questioned by a number of latter-day lawyers, and I understand this is one part of the lawyer, of being a lawyer, that you're able to question the work of what a previous lawyer may have done. But his defense or lack of defense in the first trial has been questioned as to how he should have approached it. But ma'am, you are dead on. John Quinn was an important man in the annals of Joyce studies. Next.
Hi, Jesse. It's Frank DePrima.
Hi, Frank.
It's great to see you, and that was just fantastic. I was a Jesse Meyers groupie. I not only took the course at the Irish Consulate, but I took and repeated the course in Dubliners at NYU, and I took and repeated the course in portrait at NYU, and I'm just so delighted to hear this now. Just two quick things. One is, shouldn't Quinn have appealed?
Should Quinn have appealed? Is that what you're asking, Frank?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I forget the name of the attorney at NYU who does the morality of legal trials. He's written in the Washington Law Review a rather extensive view of the faults that he found with Quinn, amongst which was the lack of the appeal, let alone how Quinn approached the magistrate's trial in New York City of the two women. So Quinn is a very interesting figure to look at. And if I'm not mistaken, and I certainly may well be, Joyce was not excited by Quinn's participation, because he also found that Quinn sold his work very cheaply to other collectors, and he was perturbed at that. Frank, I look forward to seeing you again one of these days. Next.
Hello, hi. Thank you very much. I'm Noah Lehrman. I'm actually the son of Dana Lehrman, who spoke earlier and who studied with you earlier and then went on to study at University College in Dublin. And she raised me with a tremendous love of Joyce, which I then proceeded to go on and study with Arnold Weinstein at Brown and eventually make my own pilgrimage to Dublin as a singer-songwriter. And one of the ways that she helped me fall in love with it at an early age was by taking me to the Bloomsday observances at Symphony Space that Isaiah Sheffer originally put on, and which evolved over the years and were always very incredible. You know, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. And during the pandemic, 2 years ago, they actually transitioned very beautifully with online observances, although less so this past year. And I was just wondering, speaking of Joyce's continuing influence on a lot of amazing theater performers who were involved with that, as well as the celebrations in general, whether you had any other Bloomsday observances. I know it's still early in the year to see exactly what's happening, especially in this day and time. But if you had any others of note you could mention, and then hopefully we'd have a chance to appreciate in person or online.
There are always a number of these June 16th festivals. I can tell you one that I went on by the Sons of James Joyce in Brooklyn made me understand that early life conditioning of consuming inordinate amounts of alcohol was very important for the proper display of humor on Bloomsday. And I can recommend wholeheartedly, not the massive consumption of alcohol, but if you have the opportunity of being in Ireland on the week of Bloomsday, it's a lot of fun because there are a lot of things that you can look into for yourself. The city is overwhelmingly prepared to offer all kinds of Joyce local reflections as to this is the pharmaceutical shop where Mr. Bloom bought the bar of soap, and this is the restaurant where he had his perfect meal. So many events. I do recall there's a bar in Lower Manhattan, which I believe is called the Ulysses, which is a lot of fun for Bloomsday also. I think we've spent about 25 minutes on this, perhaps one more.
Jesse?
Yes.
Hi, Jesse. It's Anne Brett here. I'm in Greenwich. I'm from Sligo. I lived in Dublin for 11 years, and I took your year-long reading at the library years ago. And I really enjoyed this evening. But did you see on the Irish Times that the Barney McKinnon's pub in Dublin is for sale?
I've been following that story, Anne. It's unfortunate. As Dublin has modernized, there are a number of important sites relating not only to Joyce, but to a number of major Irish literary figures that are unfortunately not protected by a national policy of keeping these edifices for the public because they are important in terms of historical events. So it's good to hear
Anyway.
you again.
Oh, good to see you. Thank you.
One more and we'll call it a night.
Julian, it's Margaret. Let me know if there are no more questions. We can wrap it up. I just wanted to see. I did just want to mention to Anne, my family is also from Sligo, so I'm very happy to hear that. If there are no more questions, and I guess that's up to Julian to figure out at this point, we can wrap it up.
Okay,
Jesse has,
thank you,
Jesse, I was
Margaret.
just going to say, Jesse, you've given us a lot of your time this evening. It's been a fascinating evening, and it's obvious that you have the devotees and people who are Joycean scholars. I have to say, I mean, I took a lot of things away from tonight. I love the idea that the original cover, the color of the original cover, was made to honor the Greek flag. I thought the whole idea of Homer and the Odyssey and Ulysses, that joining, that synergy was really very fascinating to me. So I enjoyed it. And I obviously it's obvious your friends and former students and everybody also enjoyed the program. So I will leave you with the final word. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for participating tonight. We're very happy to have Jesse here. Thank you.
Great. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate, but not tonight, to contact me via either email, jesse.myers9@gmail.com, jesse.myers9@gmail.com, or if you have the Coscob phone book, give me a call. But I also have available a listing with some commentary of approximately 70 books that I stole from for this material. Thank you all very, very much, and I appreciate very much your participation. And do remember your public library and how important it is. But as in Animal Farm, even more important than other public libraries is the Greenwich Public Library. Thank you again, and good night.